Hi there. Well, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about WebQuest. So, for the WebQuest, what you're going to do is you're going to create a series of web pages, or maybe you can think of it even as a website. And so you're going to work either individually or collaboratively. You have the option this time. If you remember with the digital media project, I asked you to work in a group. This time you can pick, either in a group or by yourself. And what you're going to do is you're going to create a WebQuest. So the question is, what is a WebQuest? Well, early on in the days of the internet, there was a desire to sort of help people learn how to do research and use data from the internet. How to take that, look and search for things, and then use that information in some useful way in school. And so there were a lot of thoughts about how to do that, different thoughts, scattered thoughts. Some of them resulted in something like an internet treasure hunt, and maybe some of you have experienced this, where you sort of go out and look for arcane bits of trivia on the internet and then report back, or maybe go somewhere and look up, again, something that's maybe not terribly useful in terms of school, but is an interesting little web trick to know. And that's how some of these internet treasure hunts sort of developed. Well, there was a professor at San Diego State, his name's Bernie Dodge, and in the early mid-90s, he thought there had to be a better way to do this. So he proposed something a little more systematic called a WebQuest. And so WebQuest is actually a trademark name. And so there's a format to follow and even a whole community of people that practice WebQuest. Some of you may have done a WebQuest when you were in school. And so we're going to be sort of joining that community, entering into that relationship, if you will, with a larger body of people that's been around for 20 years or so. So the idea of a WebQuest is to provide a structured way of using the internet to do something productive in terms of school. So you first, like the digital media project, you want to think about the classroom. You know, am I elementary or secondary? What grade level am I in? What content area am I in? How am I using this from a curriculum standpoint in the classroom? Is this introducing something? Is it carrying the freight for a lesson? Is it enrichment? Is it something for struggling students to go through? Is it something that I want to refer people to if they've already done well doing something else? So you want to think about all those same questions for the digital media project. You want to think about all those for the WebQuest and sort of answer those. I'm hoping that this WebQuest is something you can develop and use in your student teaching or in your actual teaching. So I want it to be of really good quality. The other interesting thing about this is you're then going to pilot test this WebQuest, and I'll talk about that later. So, as I said, you're going to think about how you want to do this, where it's going to fit into the curriculum, and you're going to make those connections to standards that you did in the digital media project. So that digital media project will sort of give you a nice model for how to do the WebQuest. Now, if you want to leverage things and you want your digital media project and your WebQuest to be over similar areas so that maybe you could use your digital media project as part of your WebQuest, that's not a problem. If you wanted to leverage your Blackboard shell and make it kind of line up with the content in the WebQuest so that your WebQuest could even be something that's used as part of your shell, that's okay too. Now I know in some sense your shell is going to be finished before the WebQuest is finished, but if you wanted to leave a placeholder for your WebQuest and say, I'm going to use this WebQuest as part of this shell, I will understand that. I won't subtract points or say it's the shell is unfinished or anything like that if you want to do that. So I'm all about leveraging stuff. So if you want to do that, that's fine. And as always, if you're taking a methods class or you have taken a methods class, you developed a unit plan or a lesson plan, and you want to make this kind of actualize that unit or lesson plan in terms of technology, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So again, I'm all about leveraging. So that's kind of the boilerplate on the WebQuest. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little more specific and kind of guide you through the format. But since I'm introducing this by way of a screencast, there's going to be more responsibility on you to go ahead and review the materials, and then when we meet in class next time, you can ask any questions you have, and I'll be happy to answer them. Also keep in mind that I've been doing this assignment for several years, so you have the opportunity to look at what other students have done and sort of get some inspiration and kind of an idea of what's expected from some of those. So let's go ahead and take a look at all that, shall we? Let's go ahead and take a look at the resources that are available to you. So if you go into Blackboard under Artifacts and you click on WebQuest project. You can see there's the due date there. So for starters, remember that you're going to be creating a series of web pages, maybe even think of it as a website. So I would suggest that you use Weebly. It's free, and I think it's used in CPS 150, and I'm pretty familiar with it, so I can give you support. It's a good piece of web software, Web 2.0 software. I did mention it was free to log in. You can have 2 complete websites with different names through Weebly with a free account. And what's nice about that, and some students will use one website and put all their web pages on there. The WebQuest for this class, the digital portfolio for this class, which we're going to get to a little later, and then roll that into 429 when you do the portfolio for that class, and then roll that into student teaching when you do your portfolio for that class. It's all kind of the same continuum of development of portfolios. So some students just use one website for all of that. Some use 2 websites. They create one just for the WebQuest, and then they create the other one for all the portfolio stuff. You can do it either way, but Weebly works pretty well for that. The other nice thing about Weebly is that it will allow you to kind of modularly put things together. So it works in these little modules, and you assemble these modules almost like a bunch of Legos on a page. And there's modules for images, there's modules for text, there's modules for video, there's different modules, and you just sort of put them together the way you want them to, and the look is pretty good. What I like about Weebly is that the templates are really nice, and you don't have to spend that much time developing a really nice looking set of web pages. You can spend your time focusing on good content because the web pages already look pretty good. So I'd recommend Weebly as the development platform for this. But if you want to do something else, I would suggest going with your strength. So if you know how to use Google Sites, or you know how to use Wix, those are also free alternatives. You might want to go with one of those. I'm not as familiar with those. I probably couldn't support you quite as well, but I can probably figure things out fairly well. You could also try something like SeaMonkey. If you don't want to do something on the web and you want to do it on your computer, SeaMonkey would allow you to do that, but then you have to put it on the web somewhere. I can help you with that. But Weebly is pretty much, like I said, my suggestion for a platform. So you're going to need something for creating web pages, and then next thing I would suggest doing is taking a look at the overview and the description of the assignment and the way it's going to be assessed right in here. I would start here with this thing that's called Building Blocks for WebQuest. So if you click on that, what will happen is you'll get this short little introduction of the components of a WebQuest. So I'm just going to walk you through those really quick. First of all, we've got the introduction, and this is the first page that the students are going to see. So it's kind of like the home page for the site. It's the one that should grab people's attention. As it says, it should set the stage for the activity, meaning it's going to provide an authentic look. The whole point of a WebQuest is to take students out of the classroom and let them authentically deal with some kind of a problem or solve something or find something using the tools that a professional in mathematics or science or social studies or language arts or the arts or would use to do the same thing, or language, like foreign language. So you want them to approach the problem the way somebody from one of those areas would approach it, which means that you take them out of the school setting. So the introduction maybe sets the scenario or gives them a role to play or some other way of getting them out of the classroom and getting them into some authentic scenario. So authenticity is kind of a big thing, I think, that makes a WebQuest something that's really good for students to use. That's what the introduction page does. So you can look at the introduction pages for some of the example WebQuests that I'll refer to later on to see what I think works really well. Then we have the next page is called the task. And what the task page does is it will be very specific about what the students are supposed to do. So there's some kind of a task, there's a problem to be solved, there's a presentation to be made, there's a recommendation to be made. Whatever that turns out to be, that's what the task is. And so you're just going to lay it out there. Here's what we're looking for. Here's what the artifact, or here's what it is we're expecting you to do. That's what the task does. And it's easy to slip back into school mode when you talk about the task. So you want to keep that authentic feel when you talk about the task. Next thing we've got is the process. And the process is where you help them as much as possible, step by step, to figure out how to do this. So you scaffold their understanding and their process as best you can. So the process will probably look differently depending on the age level. So for example, if you have younger students, you'll probably want to be very specific about what they need to do to solve the task. If they're older students, you may want to give them more latitude on how to solve the task, but help them understand how to metacognitively examine what they're doing and decide if they've done a good job or not. In other words, there's not going to be an automatic correct answer. They have to decide if this is a good approach or a correct answer or not. And they have to have some guidelines in mind. So maybe working them through that process is more what you're looking at with older students. In the process area, this is where you also help them do the internet research. And so it's different than the internet treasure hunt that I talked about previously. What you're doing here is you're going to sort of teach them how to do the research. And so again, this will look different for different age levels. For example, with young children, okay, lower L, what you might do here is you might put all the information they need on your own set of web pages. Rather than send them out on the web to find stuff, you just get all the information and create the pages yourself and let them look on the pages that you create for the information they need. So that's probably a good way to go for lower elementary. For upper elementary, what you might do is maybe send them to 1 or 2 websites to get information. But when you do that, you probably need to give them very specific guidance on what to look on a website. In other words, click on this link, look at the upper right corner of the page, and look at what it says here. You know, kind of point them right to where they need to go. So you're guiding them a little more on how to find that information. But don't be afraid to be very explicit with upper L kids. Let's say you're aiming this at middle school or high school. In both those areas, you're probably going to give them more flexibility, maybe give them a little bit more of a research opportunity to find stuff. But in both those cases, you want to be able to scaffold how they know the information is worthwhile. And for the starting point, I'd go with how you know when you find looking for information on the internet, how do you know that something is worthwhile? Well, I know for myself, one of the approaches I use is triangulation. In other words, I'll look for information, and if I see the same information on 2 or 3 or 4 different places, that will, to me, gives it more credibility rather than if just one person is saying this and nobody else seems to be saying it. Doesn't mean I disbelieve them, but I'll give more weight when more people seem to be approaching a similar conclusion or finding similar information or seeing things a similar way. Another way that I might do it is I might look at the source, the person that's writing, and see is it somebody who's trying to sell me something? Because if there is, I might take some of what they're saying with a grain of salt. Not all of it, but there'll be a little skepticism. If there's nothing in it for them, they're just trying to add to the body of knowledge in the culture or in the field, then I'll probably give them a little more credibility. I'll maybe look at some of their experience and credentials in the field. If I can find that, and they seem to be somebody who knows something about the field or has been around a long time, that might be another thing that I might give value to. Also, how long the page has been around. If it's something that's been around for a while, that means there's some stick-to-itiveness. And maybe if other people like to respond to what's being said, maybe if it's a blog or something like that, and there's a lot of feedback from other people, that tells me people are reading it and that there's some interest there, rather than something somebody wrote once upon a time. Sometimes you run across web pages by, no offense to you all, college students, and that could be an assignment, and there may not be as much credibility there because it's just something somebody did one time. It's not really something they see as part and parcel of their livelihood. That, as opposed to maybe something that comes from a classroom teacher or a college professor, where somebody's kind of investing a bit of their life into what they're saying. So again, the key is to guide the students, middle school, high school students, to guide them through the art of finding information. And in doing so, you probably need to think about how you do it. And sometimes this challenges you to maybe improve how you do research. Maybe you realize in thinking this through that, wow, I don't have great advice to give to students. Maybe I need to sharpen up my skills on doing internet research. So sometimes students have seen that happen. So I'll just kind of throw that out there. Next thing we've got is the evaluation page. And the evaluation page is where you want to put a rubric out there, and I'll get to that in just a few minutes, and so they see exactly how they're going to be evaluated. Now this is another of those areas where it's easy to slip back into school mode. So try to stay in that authentic scenario. In other words, if you're asking them to do a presentation before a panel, then the evaluation is the rubric the panel would use to accept the recommendation or not. As opposed to, you're going to give a talk before the teacher and your classmates, and here's how I'm going to grade you. See the difference between the two? So you can still have the rubric can look very similar. Maybe some of the headings will be different, but just you want to just preserve that scenario when you do the evaluation. So that's the next page is the evaluation. And then finally, we've got the conclusion. And the conclusion should do a couple of really important things. It should tie everything up in a nice bow, a nice package. In other words, bring the WebQuest to some good conclusion. And you'll have to think about what that conclusion is. I don't have any magic formula for it, but you can look at some of the examples and you can see what other people have done and kind of get some good ideas. The other thing you want to do is you want to give something for somebody who really enjoys what they're doing. You know, you do a WebQuest on a subject and you've got a few students that just eat this up and they want to do more and know more. So give them some more to go by. Maybe it's a movie or a documentary TV show, or maybe it's a book, or maybe it's some articles that go into more depth on the subject. And this is something that you know that students that are reading this up would really enjoy. So put that into the conclusion. Okay. So these are the set of pages you want to be sure to do in order for this to be called a WebQuest. Remember, a WebQuest is a trademarked concept. So we want to stick close to the format and have specific pages called this. I know sometimes students want to get creative and call these pages different things, and if you do that, then maybe you've developed a Reuben Quest, or insert your first name in there in place of web. You've got something that you could name after yourself, but it's not really a WebQuest. So to call it a WebQuest, you want to follow this format. There's another page that's not described in amongst these Lego bricks, but it is the teacher page. And if you go back over and look at the description over in Blackboard, you can see the description of what I'm looking for in the teacher page. The teacher page is kind of analogous to what you did when you did the write-up for the digital media project, except instead of doing a separate write-up, you just embed it into a separate web page. And what you do is you talk about the context, what grade level are we talking about, what content, how are you going to use this in the course of the curriculum, what are the links to standards, just some of the same things you did for the digital media project you'll do here. And then that will pretty much take up all the pages. Then what you're going to do is you're going to do some pilot testing. And with the pilot testing, what you do is you find a couple of people to look at your WebQuest. One person can be anybody in the whole world. It can be your roommate. It can be your best friend if that's a different person. It can be your mother. It can be your spouse or your significant other. Anybody in the whole world without regard to college experience or age range or anything like that. The second person I'd like for you to pilot test should be somebody close to the grade level, like within one grade. So if your WebQuest is aimed at 4th graders, maybe you want to get either 3rd, 4th, or 5th grader to take a look at it and give you some feedback. Now in terms of the feedback, you want to structure that a little. So you don't want to just say, so tell me what you think, and then they say, well, I thought it was pretty good. And then you write down, well, the pilot tester thought it was pretty good. That's not terribly useful to you, and that doesn't tell me a whole lot either. So my suggestion would be that you structure it somehow, meaning you do some kind of an interview, or maybe you have them fill out a little survey and you have some questions on there that they can address specifically. And I've got some examples here. How well did the links work? How easy was it to navigate the pages and kind of understand where they're at? Did they kind of get what you were trying to do? Did it seem reachable, doable? Did it seem authentic? Did the pages have aesthetic appeal? Was the text easy to understand? Did the images contribute something useful? Those are all things that would be good things to ask, and the feedback on that is very specific and would really help you make improvements on it. So then what you do is you could just take that information and just write it up. Now this second piece, the pilot test, the second piece, you can go ahead and upload that to the wiki. So what I would expect to see on the wiki is a link to your WebQuest and then the pilot test. Now, unlike the digital media project, you can work in groups on this. So you can work individually or you can work as a group. If you work as a group, then I would like for each member of the group to do 2 pilot tests. And I would also like the groups to be no more than 2 people. Back with the digital media, I said 3 was okay. This time I'd like 2 at the most or individual. So if 2 of you are working together on a WebQuest, then I'll see 4 pilot tests, 2 from each person. If you're working by yourself, then I'll see 2 pilot tests, 2 that you did by yourself. In terms of understanding the concept of the WebQuest, one thing that I would really suggest you look at is this 5 rules for writing great WebQuests that was put together by Bernie Dodge. And Bernie Dodge is the professor at San Diego State that first conceived of WebQuests. He wrote this probably about 15 years ago, but don't let the age scare you. I think the rules and the kind of the approach is still really good. So I think this gives to be some really good advice. So after you've kind of looked this over, I would look at that and see some of the advice he gives for writing a great website. Now I mentioned rubrics. I'm going to be grading you using this WebQuest rubric right here. And this is a rubric that was developed as part of the WebQuest community, not something that I thought of. And so since we're entering into a community, I'm living by that as well. And so that's how I'm going to assess you. So you can go ahead and take a look at that rubric and see what it's all about. When you do your rubric for the WebQuest, I'm going to ask you to use something automated, use something online to create it. Rubistar would be my preference. So you can use that. Again, it's a free sign up. It's real easy to use. I used it for the rubric that I created for this. If you see a different web page or a different piece of software that you want to use to create your rubric, that's okay. I just don't want you to gin it up from Microsoft Word or from some word processing program. I want you to use something that creates the rubric for you, just to give you some experience in doing that. Okay, and then down here, of course, is the assessment for how I'm going to do it. Again, using that rubric. Down here at the bottom are some examples from EDU 360 students from the past, real students that sat right where you sat once upon a time. And these are all fairly recent examples, I think from 2011, 2010, 2011, and later. The earlier examples are on the left, and the later examples are on the right. So you can look at any of these from either secondary, elementary, and kind of get a feel for what the WebQuest should look like. These examples are all students that scored really high. They either got straight 4s or they got maybe a 3, 5, or 2, and all 4s. So these are really good examples to look at. And I'm hopeful that maybe next time I teach this class, I can have some of your WebQuests in here as examples for future students. So feel free to look through these WebQuests and kind of get a feel for what the high bar is for this. So I think that's probably all the information in terms of resources that I have. It's just going to be important for you to digest this. Since I'm not doing this in class, I can't really read your faces and see if you're understanding things. So if you go through this and you have questions about anything, by all means, let me know and we will talk. So, how's that? Well, I hope that's helpful. So let's go ahead and get started. The WebQuest is going to be due by the due date posted in Blackboard. And the Marzano deal is in effect for this as well, which means that just like with Tech Assessment 1 and the Digital Media Project, I'm going to give you an initial round of feedback and then give you an opportunity to buff and polish it before I actually grade it. So hopefully that'll be helpful. The difference is because this is due closer to the end of the semester, the turnaround time to do that will be a little tighter than it will have been for everything else. But you'll still have the opportunity to do that. Also, I'll just mention one more thing, and that is that I adjusted the lighting between my earlier video and now. I don't know if you noticed that, but I kind of evened up the lighting a little bit because I wasn't happy with how it was. I'm going to go ahead and leave it just kind of to see. So if you want to go back and look at the lighting in the early part of the video and then look at this lighting, you can see hopefully some improvement. Anyway, that should be what you need to get started with the WebQuest. So good luck.